Hey, Michael Church, Crawl Space Ninja. Today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to talk about 5 issues or 5 problems that can actually be created whenever you decide to encapsulate your crawl space. Stay tuned. If you're new to Crawl Space Ninja, we talk about everything related to crawl spaces, basements, and indoor air quality, so we hope you'll subscribe to our channel and ring that notifications bell, as well as follow us on Facebook. Believe it or not, there's actually some problems that arise from encapsulating your crawl space. So if you pay a company like us or decide to do it yourself to control humidity and moisture and make it more energy efficient, you got to be careful because there are some issues out there that can come from crawl space encapsulation. And one of the biggest ones that we hear online and through our chats and different things like that is now there's a smell. There's some kind of smell, whether it's a cat pee smell, whether it can be a methane smell, it can be some kind of smell. So let's talk about odors in the crawl space first. So one of the things you can do to avoid odors is actually remove the old vapor barrier. A lot of companies out there, they'll just put down loose lay vapor barrier or even encapsulate over old plastic. We've even had homeowners ask us to do that sort of thing. We try to talk them out of it just because it does have the ability to create some form of odor in the future. If you've got moldy wood or something like that, or if water gets stuck between 2 layers of vapor barrier, that water can stagnate and give off odors. So we don't recommend doubling up on plastic, just like you wouldn't double up on a roof in most cases. It's a cheaper way to do it, obviously, because you don't have to go through taking the old plastic out. But that would be a way to avoid an odor in the future, is to get all that old vapor barrier out, as well as make sure you don't use a reinforced vapor barrier. Not all reinforced vapor barriers can create a cat pee smell, but it seems like more and more often we're getting people out there that have encapsulated their crawl space with some form of cheap reinforced vapor barrier, and within a few months it caused what they call is a cat urine odor. So make sure, number 1, you take out the old vapor barrier, and number 2, you use a solid vapor barrier like Crawl Space Ninja offers, and I'll put a link to that down below. Number 2, gaps in hardwood flooring. This is an interesting one, and we've gotten a few calls about it. Whenever you encapsulate the crawl space, control humidity, sometimes if you have hardwood in your house, you'll actually start to gap. The hardwood, you'll see little gaps forming inside the home. But when the hardwood is wet, it'll actually cup, but when it dries, it can shrink, causing gapping. Now, I'm not a hardwood installer, but I have talked to many hardwood installation professionals, and what they have told me about that problem is normally the wood did not acclimate properly. So when it was installed, it was actually wet and it was bigger than it should have been, or it was dry and installed on a wet subfloor. So if you take dry wood, and you normally can't install hardwood in a day, right? I mean, especially if it's a pretty big house, you take the wood and you install it on a wet subfloor, it begins to expand because it's absorbing that moisture from that subfloor. So by the time you get to the end of the job, it could be off millimeters. But then you go in and encapsulate the crawl space, and you dry that subfloor out, and then that hardwood starts to dry out, and then all of a sudden that wood starts to shrink and it creates gapping in the hardwood. So unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do about that, but would you rather have a wet, moldy house or gapped hardwood? So that's kind of the trade-off, and not all hardwood will gap, just so you know. If it was installed properly and your hardwood installer made sure that the subfloor was dry when they put it down, you shouldn't have any issues. But we have heard about people having gapping problems in hardwood after crawl space encapsulation. Okay, number 3, again, doesn't happen very often, but gaps in doors. So whenever your house is moist, it's humid and all that sort of thing, you may have a sticking door, right? Well, if they install the door and it was wet, and then you dry the house out, the door will actually shrink. So that's another issue. You may see bigger gaps around where the door meets the framing. You could even see gaps from where the flooring and the baseboard are, especially if you've got some kind of hardwood or something with maybe a quarter round or different things like that. So those are other issues that can be caused from your home drying out because the humidity, your house isn't as wet as it was prior to that. Most homes today are very, very humid. You know, the average humidity outside is in the 70s in the South. So then all of a sudden you put this dehumidifier in and you encapsulate the crawl space and it starts to dry the entire house out. So if you start to see gapping around doors and even baseboards, that could also be an issue that you have to address. So number 4 is if you've had floor supports installed, a lot of people call them jack posts or post jacks, and they were installed when the subfloor was wet, and then you dry out the crawl space, the subfloor is dry, the wood shrinks. Now you've got a support issue because the jack post has lost its ability to support because the wood actually moved away from it. As a matter of fact, we just recently released a video about some of the 5 most destructive things that crawl space contractors do, and I'll put a link to that down below. But what you have to make sure of is that if you're going to install jack posts or sister floor joists because you've got rotted wood or something like that, you want to make sure you dry that crawl space out first. Get rid of the mold first, and then do your floor supports or your sister of your wood, and you won't have that issue in the future. And the last thing, this is more of an annoyance than anything else, is that you can actually create a squeaky floor. Again, if you've installed plywood when it was moist, and then you installed carpet over it, or you installed hardwood when it was moist, and then you dry it all out, well, then you got gaps in the subfloor. You could even have gaps between the subfloor and the joists. And then you're walking across your living room and it starts to squeak, or you notice around door jambs are squeaking and different things like that. So those are like the 5 main problems that we hear people talk about. And it doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen to every home. But if those are the things that you're noticing after encapsulation, just to give you a heads up. So my name is Michael Church with Crawl Space Ninja. We hope you make it a happy and blessed day, and we'll see you later.